Hello everyone and welcome to an episode of Klang TV. My name is Alice, I'm one of the community managers here at Klang Games, and today we have two very wonderful Klangers that are here with us. We are going to talk about female leadership here at Klang. Would you like to give a quick introduction as to who you are and what you do at Klang?
Sure, so my name is Maria and I am the Studio Operations Director.
I'm Cathy and I'm the Development Director.
Fab, awesome, thank you. So I have a few questions for both of you. First of all, how does it feel to be a woman at Klang?
Oh boy, okay. So I was just talking to you two about this, but this is one of the very few times in my career that I've ever regularly been in a room that's by majority female. I think my entire upbringing in games, it's been that I am the only woman in the room, and having that representation has been really lovely, and I think it's unfortunately still a rarity in the industry, but that's something that's been very special here.
Yeah, I actually found myself kind of counting the amount of women, either in physical meeting rooms or in online meetings as well, and it's very surprising here at Klang, you know, the amount of representation that we have. Yeah.
So how does it feel to be specifically a female leader at Klang?
So I think it's really interesting because the studio I was at before this, lovely people, really enjoyed working with them. But I think when we said that that studio was diverse, there was a very specific definition of diverse, right? It was predominantly East Asian. It was predominantly that there was female leadership at certain tiers of the studio, but not at the very, very top. And that's not been true here. And I've seen a very interesting trickle-down effect with that, where it's because we kind of have women at the top, because we look at diversity from a lot of different vectors, actually. Obviously, there's always room for improvement, but we do look at it from a lot of different vectors. It means that I see systematic practices to diversity and inclusion that I haven't ever seen as a part of the beginnings and the foundation of a studio that I do see here, right? Like I see the inclusion of diversity and inclusion questions and interview panels. I see consideration towards how we start building the right culture really, really early on before it gets baked into a decade-long tradition. So that's something that I've really enjoyed at Klang.
Yeah, I have a similar experience as well, I guess, because as you said, diversity sometimes in different companies have like very specific meanings, and I think here we genuinely have a more diverse team at different levels and different teams. I see the industry has grown a lot. I think myself, I've grown a lot as a female in leadership position, as a game developer as well. But I think if I look back in time, the video game industry was not as easy as it may be, or welcoming as it may be for women now. You know, I didn't have any women that I could look up to when I started, you know. And so for me, it was very difficult even to apply for a role, because I thought I wouldn't be good enough, you know, for that role. It almost took a lot of convincing, you know, from my closest family and friends.
I mean, I think there are two things I have to say here, and they're maybe a little bit non sequitur, but one of the things that I notice with Klang and the female leadership here at Klang is that there was only a very specific kind of woman that I used to see in leadership groups, and they had to present very masculine. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the problem is that then there's only one type of person that you can look to, and that seems appropriate. And a lot of the times I think that was built from an expectation of what success has to be. That's one thing that's kind of been different for me here, is that I feel as though people are trying to present as their different authentic selves, and it hasn't been, I need to be some approximation of a man to do XYZ thing. The other thing that I thought was extremely interesting at Klang, when I applied to Klang, I actually applied for a team producer role. And I got partway through the panel, and Isabel, our co-CEO, and someone else who actually said, I think that Cathy should be in a different position. And I think that the impact she can have in development director role is actually going to be what is more appropriate. So even as early as the interview process, people were advocating for me in a way that I've never seen. So that's something that's, yeah.
Another great thing that I've seen at Klang is, because in bigger corporations, there are like swim lanes that are way more defined. So it is more difficult to interact with different people from different disciplines, and especially women, right? Because like you were mentioning before, we don't have female representation at all levels in some companies, and here it's kind of more widespread. But also because it's collaborating here is easier, then it's way easier to collaborate with women from another disciplines, from another background. And so that is something that I was not used to in the past, and is something that I'm very much enjoying.
I'll back that up and say that is, now that you say that is one of my favorite parts of being at Klang, is that, for instance, you and I, we're different disciplines, but we step in and help each other very regularly. And that's something that I love, is that I can just kind of reach out and be like, Maria, please help me. I need your brain. And it's felt non-performative in a way that I haven't really seen before.
It really feels natural. It comes like really natural, you know.
I love that. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things as well. Okay, and finally, last question. How do you think companies can best support and lift up women in the gaming industry?
Okay, the way that I'm going to phrase this is, I think whenever I go into an interview and I ask people what considerations do you have towards D&I, right? Like, how do you promote D&I in a company? What often happens is the answer that I get is, I vocally support them. Like, in my day-to-day, I support them. And that's great, and I never want to say that's not something you should do, or that's not sufficient as a person. But as a company, the number one thing that you have to deal with as a leader is to make that into a systematic practice, right? If everyone is sort of individually left to promote D&I, it's never going to be something that becomes part of the DNA of the company. So I think that's what I would say, is to have rigor around how you define this for the company at large.
And I would also add, raise awareness about bias. We all have different experiences. Some people have a privilege that they may not even be aware of. So it's very difficult and complicated for them to put themselves in other people's shoes, or even understand the type of challenges and blockers that, for example, women may have. So I think raising awareness about those privileges, those invisible privileges sometimes, and about the bias that may come with those, I think is something really important that all companies should be putting some effort on.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Well, I really loved hearing your opinions on this, so thank you for taking the time to sit and go through this with you. It's really, really valuable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.